little while ago, I had the joy of going to downtown to renew my passport. That's always fun. And they take those wonderful pictures. Aren't they beautiful? There's an old saying that goes, if you look like your passport picture, you need the trip. And as I look at mine now for the next 5 years, I need a trip. I really do. May I offer those some other wisdom today, not so much about how we look at pictures or how perhaps others see us, but some wisdom around this saying. The experiences that we have been through will shape our appearance. The experiences we have will shape our appearance. I know people who have been through quite an ordeal at times, and I'm sure you have as well. So perhaps sorrow or a difficult time of testing or illness or stress, and you look at them and their faces are drawn and their shoulders are kind of hunched down and they look like they've been dragged through the ringer. And then you see them sometimes later and it can be amazing because they look totally different. Say, well, what happened? You look fantastic. And they say, well, I feel good. I am. A wonderful thing happened to me. I feel like I'm a different person than I was even a week ago. Our experiences, the things that we go through, can definitely shape our appearance. Our scripture readings for this morning, I think, illustrate this in a wonderful way for us. We begin with the scene of Moses, the famous scene of Moses coming down the mountain with the law, the tablets, the 10 Commandments in his arms. And he's brought them down after time with God on the holy mountain. And he's come down to the people who are awaiting him at the foot of the mountain. But isn't it interesting that the first thing that the people do not see are the tablets? They don't see the law. They don't see the rules and the regulations. What strikes them about Moses most of all, even though he's carrying these two great big tablets, is Moses' face. His appearance. And they're staring at his face. They know something has happened to him up on that mountain. They can see it in his face. This is a different man than what they saw days ago when he went up. The text says that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. The people, though, knew that Moses had been with God. They could see it on his face. Experiences we have will shape our appearance. Our second reading today that Janice read for us comes from 2 Corinthians. And Paul is taking this Moses story and he's bringing it to his congregation in Corinth. The Christians gathered in that place. And he's taking this Old Testament story about the veil of Moses, the veil that Moses put on his face. And he uses it as an analogy to talk about life as a Christian and the journey of being a Christian. And he points out Moses did have a veil over his face. But he says, friends in Corinth, you and I do not have veils. We are not veiled from the glory of God. Paul writes, and we all with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being changed into his likeness, from one degree of glory to another. What a wonderful message for the church today, the church that gathers on this Transfiguration Sunday. We may not think about it on a day-to-day basis. It might not be part of ourselves, at least in our heads, as we walk through our daily routines and lives. But think about it. The truth is that because you and I have met God in Jesus, we are changed. We are changed from one degree of glory into another. The truth is that we, as we have gathered here in St. James context, as God's people do, but any time that God's people gather, we come together. And as we participated in Word and Sacrament, as we have sung together in praise, as we have prayed together, as we've joined in the celebration of new life at the baptismal font, As we've stood at this place and witnessed and been part of weddings and that wonderful sacrament of two becoming one, as we've gathered here and shared tears at funerals and having to say goodbye to friends, as we've gathered in relationships built in community with pancake suppers and chicken dinners and raking leaves, all in that gathering, whatever we have done, you and I have been changed from one degree or another. These are our experiences as Christians in this place, and our experiences change our appearance. Our experiences with the risen Christ have shaped us, and because of that shaping, we, like Moses did, will appear to others in a certain way. And we may not notice it, but it is ingrained in us. How could it not be? I was here on late Thursday night, and I was doing some work in the office, and just before I left, there was a light in the sanctuary here, and I looked in this back. Light was on, choir. Laura. The light was on, so I had to come in and turn the light off. But as I turned it off and I walked back to go home, I stood in here and noticed the darkness. And something caught me about the stained glass windows. I kind of knew that they were there, as we all do, but there was nothing to show me what they were. They were just dark. Somewhat formed a bit, but dark. And I think you and I are a lot about like these stained glass windows that surround us. These beautiful windows are created and were created so that we can see and experience the story of Jesus. From his birth, to his baptism, through the stories, to his death, and to his resurrection appearance in that back corner. They're there so we can walk that story when we gather as community here, so that we can look upon and recall the many ways that God has come to us in Jesus, in his story. That window over here in the corner, as I see the light coming in, reminds me and should remind all of us how Jesus turns the status quo upside down by blessing children. In Jesus' day, children were not very important. They were not the ones that people thought were high up on the pedestal, and they were to be ignored and put aside. And Jesus calls those that are least and blesses them. He didn't call the rich and the influential into his movement. He called the poor. He called the marginalized. In the window over here, in this corner where you're less, you can see Jesus turning the status quo upside down. Blessed are the poor, he said, the meek, the hungry. That wonderful reminder of the Sermon on the Mount. In that we see God's vision for God's good creation, where power and authority are not the focus of the things that will create life and prosperity. No, but in God's world, abundance comes from places of humility, from places of emptiness even. In the window in the corner in the back, as you make your way out, the miracle in Cana. The wine is in abundance and it never runs out. We know our God, who turns the ordinary into the extraordinary in our lives and in the lives of the world, and who promises life in abundance for all who will come to the party and be part of this walk with Jesus. These are the ways having Jesus in our lives have shaped us, and we are called to shine and to sparkle from the light so that others will see. These windows in the dark really aren't locked, but when the light hits and they shine and they sparkle, we see God's story with us in bright array and bright color, and it is magnificent. Just as the Israelites were looking at Moses' face, and they knew he had been talking to God, so people that we encounter ought to see in us the evidence that we have been with Jesus. The world should see us shine and sparkle because the light is shining through us. People are looking at us and experiencing us. They ought to be able to see that we walked with this Jesus. see some quality in our lives that makes us striking, makes them want to find out what this is all about. That's good news for the church, because it reminds us that God is not done with the Anglican Church yet. God's got some work to do. This Jesus movement continues, and through us, when that light shines, God's newness, God's creation, God's renewal for all will be brought forth. I think one of the best examples to me is that wonderful story about Mother Teresa, who once welcomed a group of North American sisters to Calcutta, where she was working, and they came to hear her speak. And it was a time when women were joining Mother Teresa's order in droves. Some were coming from around the world to take part in the ministry that she was doing with the poor and the sick and the marginalized in that area. And in North America, the opposite was true. Sisters were leaving the order. It was very difficult to get women to take part and join. And one of the nuns from North America said to Mother Teresa, "What are you doing to attract so many?" And Mother Teresa said, "My dear, I give them Jesus." And the nun said, "Well, that's all and good, but can you give us some strategies? Can you give us some concrete recruitment measures? What should we do to bring them in?" She said, "My dear, I give them Jesus. There is nothing else." Our experiences with Jesus shape our appearance, and the world will see that when we reflect that. When we gather here and we give thanks to God for the love that God has shown us in God's coming to us in Jesus, the world will experience that same love. When we hear of Jesus' compassion and welcoming of strangers, then the strangers we meet will experience that same loving welcome. When we hear of Jesus the healer, the giver of new life, the proponent of peace and justice for all, then the world will experience wholeness and restoration that same way. The story of the Transfiguration and what we celebrate today on the mountain is a lot about Jesus and how he was transfigured. But we have to also notice that the people that were there to witness it were changed too. Peter, John, and James were transformed. This story is as much about them as it is about Jesus. They see this experience and they are shaped and they are changed by it. Peter is excited. Let's build 3 places and just hang out, man. This is the best place to ever be. And they are scared. They are petrified. Sometimes the cloud that hangs over us in our Christian journey, in the difficulties and the challenges, in the stress. But the fact of the matter is, they are not the same people they were when they went up the mountain, and they were when they got down. And that is you and I. Their vision is new. They are in awe, they are in wonder, they see more than they can possibly ask or imagine. My friends, we will shape the world because we have been changed by meeting Jesus. We're about to enter the season of Lent, and we're about to walk a road toward the celebration of the day that changed everything, the resurrection and Easter Day. Easter and the resurrection of Jesus is the climax of that journey that we will begin on Wednesday when we gather here for our Ash Wednesday service. But before we begin that journey, I ask all of us to think about, pray about, meditate about the ways that you have been changed from glory to glory since the day you met Jesus, since the day Grandma or Mom and Dad brought you to church, since the day you first heard the stories, since the day you got excited about being together in community with friends and family, the day you realized that this Jesus of Nazareth has something to give me that I can't get anywhere else. Get excited. Find that within yourselves to start this journey. Let us all consider how Jesus has shaped us. And in doing that, may we walk this road together to shape the world. Amen.
And